It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. This week, starring the world's most famous producer, Mr. Ken Caillat.
Yeah!
And thank you, fake band. Thank you, fake audience. Welcome, real audience. Good to see you guys. Everybody's still alive and kicking. Ken, normally I would reach out and shake my guest's hand,
Right.
but yeah, there you go. I actually heard somebody saying, no more elbow bumps. I don't know. Anyway, thank you all for turning out in the middle of this virus. And Ken, thank you for doing the show, because everybody, and yesterday, our governor, you and I are over the age limit. We're supposed to be sequestered at home. So I pray that Governor Newsom isn't watching this episode, because...
See, this is an interesting time. People are getting fake IDs to be older. No, I'm over 65.
Younger.
No, it'd be older. No, I'm gonna. I need to stay home. I can't work this today.
Right. Yeah. Oh, there you go. I gotcha. Okay. So anyway, I had Ken at the Road Rally, I don't know how many months ago now, like probably 5 months ago, last November, and he just killed it. He rocked it. People loved it. The two of us sat on stage for about 2 hours, I think, and we played stuff from... Ken is a Grammy-winning producer. I should say that for those of you who don't know. Obviously, you've read the email.
Are we going to play music today?
We're not going to play music today because I'm worried about YouTube taking it down, or a copyright strike, or Lindsay being ticked off that we played a solo with a bad note or something. So,
Well, I heard that if you play your own CD that you bought, you can play it in front of anybody.
on YouTube?
Well, that's the rules. I bought my CD, I can play it.
Well, okay.
But I don't, whether
Did you buy the CD?
Well, of course.
No, you made the
Yeah.
CD. So, anyway, Ken won Record of the Year, Grammy for that. He co-produced with Richard Dashit and the band. But I want to give you a little history about him before we get into the making of Tusk, which is what we're going to talk about. By the way, Ken, Ken's second book. It's so hard to do this backwards. There we go. Get Tusked. Okay. By the way, let's talk about this right now. Let's out your dog. That, if you've ever wondered whose dog that is on the cover, I mean, who makes it to the cover of a Fleetwood Mac album? It was your dog, Scooter, right?
That was my dog, and there was no living with him afterwards. As soon as he realized that he's been exploited,
Did he get like an extra good can of dog food that night or anything?
Oh, yeah, I always did.
You love this dog, right? I mean, he was truly your best friend at the time.
Best friend, he went everywhere with me.
And he was in the studio for the entire record of Rumours and the entire record of Tusk, right?
Right.
And then, is it true that Stevie Nicks was actually pissed off and put a hex on your dog because he made it to the album cover?
Well, I don't know if it's true, but that's what she told me.
Well, then it's got to be true.
I put a hex on your stupid dog, Ken. Stevie, I didn't pick the cover.
And how did it end up with that shot getting on the cover?
Well, the adolescent band, the guy members in the band, were always making jokes about Tusk. Like Tusk, like a man,
Yeah.
And so my dog would get bored to me, and I would put my foot out and piss him off. Right?
Yeah.
And he would start wrestling with my foot, and this photographer that was there, Peter Baird, who was a big photographer in Africa, saw the Scooter's canines and said, there you go, and
Tusk.
I mean, if I wanted that picture, that we would have never happened. It would have never happened. I was so surprised.
How'd the other band members feel about Scooter making it onto the cover?
Stevie was pissed about it, but I think the guys went, yeah, cool.
Oh no, I touched my face. I'm going straight to hell. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's up there. Ariana just said, don't forget the camera's up there. I keep looking at our image on my laptop, so sorry if I forget you guys. Anyway, hello everybody in the chat room. So, anyway, let's get back to Ken's bio. So, he let's see, where is that? Focus on the record. Okay, so Ken grew up in San Jose, California, not that far from here, all things considered. He thought about going to law school, had an internship. Boy, what a decision you made. Had an internship at a law firm and then decided to bug out and head down to LA because he really wanted to be a songwriter. So he moved to LA and then got a job at a place called Wally Heider Studios, or Wally Heider Recording, or
Right.
Recording. And it was a preeminent studio, like a top 5 studio in the country, very, very well thought of at the time. And
I was trying to get jobs at RCA and Capitol,
yeah.
what I considered were the big time studios.
And so how did you end up getting a job working for Wally?
I went and applied at all those places.
Yeah.
And all those places said, "You're missing the boat, Caillat. You need to go to Wally Heider's."
Really?
And I said, "Why? Hey, I never heard of Wally Heider's." He says, "Yeah, but Wally Heider's records live bands.
Oh.
He said, who do you think records live albums?
Yeah.
Only the top bands. So if you go to Heider's, you're going to be working with the top bands."
There you go.
So
And you did.
And I went in and they fired somebody else to hire me.
Wow. Did that guy put a hex on you?
No.
So what was life like in the early days of your career working at Wally's? I mean, you know, did you start out sweeping floors, wrapping mic cables, that sort of stuff?
I swept floors. I wrapped my cables. I took the tape off of the cables and I just did it all the time. At nighttime I would go into the studio and practice.
Right.
So one day I remember Wally called me and says, I had talked to the Crosby, Stills and Nash producer.
Right.
And I said, can I practice on one of your on Country Girl from the Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young album?
Yeah.
And so for some reason he said okay.
Wow.
And I actually made a copy of the tape. I touched his master. I could have ruined it.
Yeah.
I don't tell anybody they should do that. But anyway, Wally found out and he calls me and says, "Caillat, you're pushing too hard. You're pushing too hard." But that's kind of, I was just insatiable for playing with music.
Who wouldn't be? I mean, you know, I had a similar career arc, as you know, and that's why we've bonded, I think, so much, is we both relate to that time period and working in studios like that. But so what happened? What were some of the acts that you worked with? I'm assuming that you went through the typical arc of, like gopher and then assistant engineer, and then you start to pick up the occasional gig as a first engineer, and then it kind of blossoms from there?
Kind of, but I accelerated. The first band I worked with was Crosby, Stills and Nash, and the second one was wait a minute, Rick Pecconen and War.
Oh, okay.
And so I worked with War, and I'm sitting there. I was there when they wrote that War did that song.
Cisco Kid?
Yeah.
That one? Okay.
So I was there when they recorded that one. I was there when Crosby Nash did their solo album. I did that. I started doing comedy albums. And then
George Martin. George Martin was famous for doing comedy albums before he did the Beatles. Yeah. Interesting.
So I accelerated right away, and then we started doing live albums, and I was,
because they had a remote unit, right? Wally Heider had probably the preeminent remote truck in the business. Yeah.
So we had 2 trucks, and I went out and learned I knew what every microphone was good for.
Yeah.
So I could do it on live or whatever. So.
How did you end up working with Fleetwood Mac? If I remember correctly, I think it was in the Making Rumours book that you mentioned that you were like aware of them but not a fan. They were a band that had been around for a while, but they never got really big until Lindsay and Stevie joined the group. Is that a fair statement?
Right.
So how did you end up meeting them and working with them?
Well, they as I was saying, that Wally Heider's did live remotes, and so live recordings. So I got a call one day that Fleetwood Mac had recorded the King Biscuit Flower Hour,
right?
And they needed somebody to mix the show down. And I said to the girl, by then I was probably the most popular engineer there.
Okay.
Or up and coming anyway. And I said, Fleetwood Mac? Nah, I don't want to do them. Never heard of them. And my friend Biff Dawes said, no, you got to do it.
Right.
So he says, you go buy the record. And so I went in, and on Saturday morning, I went in and mixed the radio show of King Biscuit Flower Hour.
For those of you who don't know, King Biscuit Flower Hour was the preeminent show of its type. It was they featured a live band every week.
Right.
Right? And that was like, if you got on that show, you were something.
Yeah, what would be another show like that?
Nothing that I could think of.
But yeah, so I went and mixed the song. One of the songs was Rhiannon.
Wow.
And of course it was a Saturday afternoon and I was mixing. There was no pressure. It was just a stupid radio show. So I was mixing whatever, and I was really good on that console. And Stevie was just twirling and loving the mix that I was doing. So, and I was so relaxed, which I bring that up twice because I think that was kind of one of the keys that and why I got the gig.
Yeah.
So we finished the show. The next day they said, "Geez, Ken, that was so great, but we have to go tomorrow to do the radio single mix of Rhiannon at the studio we're going to be recording our next album at."
Yeah.
Over called the Record Plant. So they had already booked this engineer who was supposed to mix the radio single.
And that was at Record Plant Sausalito?
No, it was Record Plant LA.
Okay.
So a guy named Kelly Katera was supposed to do the mix, and they said, "Sorry, Ken, we already got this thing scheduled." And so they go over and mix that night. I figured easy come, easy go.
Yeah.
That night I got a call from Richard Dashett. He said it went horribly wrong. It was awful.
Poor Kelly. Sorry, Kelly, if you're watching the show. We feel for you. We get it.
Yeah, and I'm sure what happened is they were all over him. Probably like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
Ken didn't do that. What do you do? And he was just,
oh man,
he was just
poor guy.
And knowing how they can be, Fleetwood Mac can be so intense.
Yeah.
I can feel sorry for him. And they came back for me to do it, and it was like the next day they asked me to come back on a Monday. I came back in and to mix the radio single.
And did you go to the Record Plant, or you did it at Wally's?
I did it at Wally Hyder's.
Okay.
And I still was not under any pressure. It was like, okay, I already did this once. Let's do it again.
Right.
So then they said, "Hey, how about why don't you come with us to Sausalito to do the next record?"
So if you hadn't gone to Sausalito, who would have engineered the Rumours record? Dashett was their live sound guy, right? So he was like the trusted guy they always wanted in the room. They knew he was kind of quality control or something.
And they were going to have Richard do it.
By himself.
Right. But Richard was panicking, he told me later on. He was panicking. He's like, no, let's Ken really knows what he's doing.
So was it Richard was really good at the live stuff, but just not that familiar with...
Richard's a really good ear. He's, he could tell somebody else, bring up the kick, and he could do that a little bit, but he wasn't really good at getting into the patch chords and and down in the weeds, and so he didn't want to be doing that. He felt comfortable with me.
Right.
And our relationship on that Saturday had perfected really well. So,
hey, you guys got along through all the kind of tumult and commotion that was going on.
Yeah,
for
he
both
and I
these
became
records.
best friends.
Yeah.
We're still close friends.
That's cool. So you went to Sausalito, you did the Rumours record, which we've already covered, and we don't have time to cover it in this show, and get to Tusk, but I'm going to synopsize, which is Lindsey and Stevie started gaining power in the band because the White Album, which had Rhiannon on it, started really taking off kind of midway through Rumours. Is that a fair statement?
Right. Well, and Lindsey and Stevie really got acclimated to be inside Fleetwood Mac. So, Stevie started doing those amazing vocals on Rhiannon.
Yeah.
I mean, that got her the gig for sure.
Right.
And then Lindsey's amazing guitar solos. And the whole band kind of woke up when they realized the talent of Stevie and Lindsey, the untapped reservoir of talent. So Mick found he could play his drums harder, and Lindsey would push back, and John would push, and there was such a dynamic range of the band that they really found it out, I think, not during the Fleetwood Mac album, the White Album.
Right.
They found that out on the tour supporting that record. They had like 9 months to tour and support the record.
Makes sense. People always say that the road really hones the whole deal.
Right. It gave them so much freedom. But if you listen to the White Album was produced by this guy Keith Olsen.
Right.
Who just passed on Monday, sadly.
He did?
A week ago Monday, yeah.
I didn't know that. I've golfed with him. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
But he was an elegant engineer. His sounds were beautiful. And if you listen to the White Album, they're very round and full, and mine are, I think, beautiful too, but I put lots of points on it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of edgy.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think
Rumours is just one of the greatest sounding records. I told you,
Yeah.
I was listening to it in the run up to the road rally in my office at night, and I would literally get a lump in my throat and teary eyed listening to it, going, I know what Ken did here. I know why he did this. You know, it's kind of like that brotherhood of engineers, when, especially if you're from the same era. Like, I couldn't do that same kind of interpretation with an engineer from today's records.
Right.
But, you know, you were a couple of years ahead of me, but still the same era. And I was just like, I wanted to call you up at night and go, hey, Ken, you did this because, right? And you'd go, yep. You know,
Yeah.
But anyway, so.
And there's a pride to being an engineer when you say, somebody comes in and you say, I'm going to hit play on this.
Yeah.
And you know what it's going to sound like when it comes out of your sounds come out of your speakers, you know, and you turn it up a little bit and you just go, and it's like making the perfect cake or something. It's like,
right.
You know, or the perfect daughter or son.
When there's no such thing. I've got 4 daughters and you're all perfect, but you can always change the record or alter the mix. Your children, you can only change to an extent, I think. You know,
Right.
They come out baked. You can certainly influence, but that's a whole other episode. So you finished making the Rumours record, and like halfway or 2/3 of the way through, they called you in, and you thought they were going to fire you, but instead tell everybody what happened.
Yeah, they called us in. They came in and they said, Caillat, dash it out of the room. Let's talk. We're going to talk to you. And they were trying to pretend to be really gruff.
And this was Mick and John, I'm guessing?
Mick and John. And Lindsay was already out there.
Okay.
So it was already set up. So so they went, Caillat, dash it, you're fired.
Oh,
you finished in the biz, you're fired. And Richard and I looked at each other, and we've been working 120 hours every week nonstop.
Yeah.
And so we just laughed. Like, we looked at each other and then started laughing. Like, you. Anyway, then they said, no, okay, you've been doing such a good job. We're going to give you a raise. We're going to make you producers on the record, co-producers on the record.
Wow.
So Richard looked at me and says, Cutlass, do you know what this means?
Oh, that was your nickname, was Cutlass, yeah. Right?
I said, no. What? He says, it means we're rich. I said, I thought, yeah, well, I've worked on records before. We might make a couple nickels. We might make a little money, but the record's gonna have to really sell a lot to make any money.
And it did.
45 million right now.
Unbelievable. 45 million on a single record. That'll never happen again in our industry.
No.
Wow.
I think it could. I keep saying to people, this is why I wrote these kind of books like this, because it's kind of an engineer's book, a producer's book, to know how you can maximize the sound and the quality of the record and the interesting enough.
But just the numbers alone, you could make a great record, and everything is kind of so factionalized. There's so much more music available, and it's not just the top 40 and the Billboard Hot 100. I don't think any particular act. I mean, we've seen some really big acts. I mean, Billie Eilish is probably the hottest thing out there now. I don't think she'll hit numbers anything close to that.
No. But you look at Adele. Adele was on the charts for a long time.
There were still charts, though, when she broke.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's still charts now, but radio is more
But she
important.
was popular just forever, right?
Yeah.
Every single song was a single, but I think maybe she put out a CD that... I think the big problem is they put singles out now.
Right.
So how long do you think the single is going to stay on the record? It's competing with other records, whatever's out there. So
how many years has Rumours been around now? It was made in 77?
70, came out 77, yeah.
So we're talking 43 years?
Yeah.
Wow. Who could have thought? There's no way you could have known. But you knew that you were making a great record, right? You guys...
I didn't. I knew that we made a great sounding record, but we didn't know.
Did you know that the songs were also great? And did you know that not just the engineering, but the production was great?
I knew that we loved them.
Yeah.
I knew that the record company, we played it for the record company, and it completely blew everybody away. I remember Richard and I went into Warner Brothers. I put everything on. I had a Revox 2-track. And I carried my Revox in and plugged it in, tested out the speakers, and I remember when I hit the play, they were silent.
Who'd you play for? Like Mo Austin, Lenny Waronker?
Right.
The Boys?
Yeah, the Boys.
Wow.
But when I played it for everybody, friends and family, right after we mixed it at Christmas, my best friend said in front of everybody, says, "I'm sorry, you guys wasted your time. I don't hear a single. I don't hear a hit."
Oh, man.
And we were like literally devastated.
Are you still rubbing that in his face?
Oh, yeah.
That's what best friends
whenever
are
he
for.
says he doesn't like something, I order twice.
Right, exactly. Okay, so now you've got this newfound position, fame, and power. And I mean, frankly, I was, 3,000 miles away from you in the other coast. And as I mentioned on stage at the Road Rally.
Dueling consoles.
Yeah, but all of us, there was a brotherhood. You and I never met, but still, we could be on a session in Miami. At the end of the night, everybody would end up in the mastering room because they had great monitors in that room, and we would listen to that record and just go, wow, I wonder how they got the bass sound, or read an interview in Recording Engineer Producer magazine and go, oh, that's how they did. Mm-hmm. So we were all trading licks. There was this brotherhood of that upper 5% maybe who were fortunate and privileged to work in studios like Criteria or Wally's, and nobody was jealous of anybody. It was strange. It was like we were rooting for you 3,000 miles away, although we didn't know you.
Right.
And
I remember I met Glenn Johns.
Yeah.
He came over and he had just done the Eagles, and we were talking about how did you get this sound and how did you get that. And at that point I was still a nobody, but I was just in the conversation. But they were talking about how great American snare sounds were, and they said that they had the only way they could create that snare sound was to have to slow the tape down. I said, no, we didn't. We just loosen the bottom head and the snares a little bit.
Yeah.
Put some paper towel on there. Well, we had to slow the tape down. Bloody hell.
Oh my gosh.
But how they across the sea they were doing the same thing.
Just a different way.
Yeah.
Going for the same sounds. So now after that record was done, and let's move on to the recording of Tusk. So Lindsay has more power even now because the record has sold a gazillion copies. The band is on, the band has power over the label. Lindsay has power over the band. Is that a fair statement?
Right.
And you guys built a studio just for making the next record. So
the next Rumours.
Right. So, but Lindsay didn't want to make, if I remember correctly, he said, I don't want to make a part 2 or a sequel to Rumours, right?
Right.
And what was his goal? What did he want to accomplish?
He didn't really know. That was the funny thing about it. That was the sad thing about it. He didn't know what he wanted to do, but he knew his fans, he thought, would wanted him to be grunge, wanted to be more edgy, more dirt. And
yeah.
So he didn't know what that meant. So, like the first day, and I talk about it in the book, first day I'm recording him, and I'm getting the sounds, and he used to let me, really make good sounds, and so he just gave me all the time in the world, and we changed mics, and he said, "Okay, you ready?" I said, "Yeah, let's put this down." He goes, "Okay, before we hit record, turn all your knobs 180 degrees."
Did you think he was joking?
I did at first. I said, "What?" And they said, "No, do it really." So I turned them, and guitar went just like this, all muffled, because I had put a lot of points on it.
Yeah.
And he said, "Now hit record." I said, "Wait a minute, I can't record this like this." I said, I need something more to go on. What are you thinking? And I remember I asked him, I said, are you saying you want this next record to be more emphasis on the bottom end? He goes, yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Was he just being manic and contrary, or did he actually, was he searching for something, but he just hadn't seen what it was?
He didn't know what it was. I read accounts that he wanted to push himself into such foreign territory that he hoped he had the genius to get him out of it.
Okay.
So he was just doing things like, he would bring guitars recorded at home. He started recording at home.
He set up a legit studio at home, right? He got an MCI multi-track or something, and
so we had no input. And he would bring in distorted vocals and guitars and he would push it, make it distort more.
Were you guys all petrified? I mean, you meaning you and the founding members of the band being Mick, John, and Chris, that, I mean, were you guys all looking at each other out of the corner of your eyes going, holy crap, what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, that day he went and told me to turn the knobs the other way. He came into the room, he had cut all his hair off. You know, he had that kind of afro.
Yeah.
And he had snipped it all off, and it was just chopped off. And he cut all his pants up, and they were falling apart. And his girlfriend, who was really into cocaine,
yeah,
she said, you need to be more, she started having him more mascara. So
interesting.
So he would start to walk around with, he was always sucking his cheeks in.
Trying to look like a male model,
I don't know.
Blue Steel.
Yeah. But anyway, so we at the end of so we used to show up for work every day for 366 days, making the Tusk album, not knowing what the hell was going to happen, whether he was going to be in a good mood, and he couldn't really. Sometimes we would record the same song for 10 hours, or he would have us slow the tape down and then speed it up, and then he would sing a slowed down vocal and a sped up vocal. But later on, when I was writing this, we realized that had it been more mature,
yeah,
we probably would have come in and said, "Look, Lindsay, tell us what you're doing. You don't have to. We don't have to be enemies. We'll help you be
who you're
whatever you want to do."
But he respected you. I got that sense from reading both books, that he always did like you and respected your work. So I think
he started getting aggravated at some point, because I don't know, he may have been right that I was trying to make a beautiful sound,
right?
But he loved the sounds. I mean, and I in his defense, he made his song sound so horrible, in my opinion.
Yeah. So
I had to work really hard to bring them back so they weren't such a contrast on the record. But the girls' songs were incredible. So
you mentioned in the book, you said that when he worked with Stevie, that he almost like would drop that whole manic side and go back to the Lindsay and Stevie that they were when they were a couple, even before when they joined the band. And it was almost, for lack of a better word, like nurturing, wanting to really help her bring her stuff to fruition without trying to destroy it or break it down and make it crazy like this.
He didn't do any grunge guitars. Listen to A Beautiful Child of hers.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful, that's, I think, one of the prettiest sounds and recordings that we ever did. I mean, we have some fancy tricks, and guitars are just so ethereal, and or Sarah, he just did some great work.
Yeah, it's hard to believe the same guy could be part of those two things, but I found that to be very interesting when I was reading this book, that he was able to turn off the manic part and go back to being the guy that he was. So maybe, I'm not a shrink, just letting you know, but maybe it was bipolar, but he was able to control it, turn it on and off at a time. So that's bipolar people, I think, can't control, when the bad stuff happens. I don't know. Anyway, I did notice something very fascinating today. What did I do with that sheet? I was looking at the track list. It was a double album, 4 sides, just for those of you who've never... You got to get this record. It's a masterpiece of a different sort, but it is a masterpiece. It's just not like Rumours, which he didn't want.
Right.
But if you listen to the song titles, The Ledge, these are all songs that Lindsay wrote. The Ledge, What Makes You Think You're the One, Not That Funny, That's Enough for Me, Walk a Thin Line. I mean, those are all titles that if you wanted to associate
Tusk.
them with his... Tusk, with his manic state throughout the making of this record, you could say, wow, he was almost like crying for help or trying to get attention or something.
And I love some of his songs, What Makes You Think You're the One or Walk a Thin Line. There's some beautiful melodies in there, and he sustains these towering vocals in the song, and so eventually I guess he let me bury some of the dirty stuff, and I mean, we had to. Some of it had to be dirty, but you know, we got into a situation where the girl songs were mostly slow. So when you're putting together an album, a running order of an album, you kind of want to have a little bit of everything, so that you can keep the tone of the record kind of poppy, moving along. So this was we were forced to move some of Lindsay's songs up because they were the fast ones, and then it made the contradiction between the pretty songs and like what's the first song and second song?
Over and Over, followed by The Ledge.
Right.
Followed by Think About Me, which was a Chris McVie song. Followed by Save Me a Place, which was Lindsay. Didn't you say in the book, Save Me a Place, you always kind of felt that was Lindsay saying, save me a place at the table or as part of the family, that it was his way of almost saying he was sorry, like, don't forget me.
I don't know.
Something was mentioned somewhere about him. He strikes me, who the hell knows? Maybe it was the drugs, maybe he was manic, I don't know. But he comes across in the book as a troubled guy and kind of a lonely guy. He already had this family, and you guys were a family, and he wanted to be part of it, but yet he was acting out like a kid that is a...
He didn't know how to be a part of it.
Yeah.
He would come in, and if everybody was laughing, they wouldn't be laughing in 10 seconds after he got in.
Wow. That's no fun.
So
that's
like,
no way to make a record.
Because Lindsay had a point where he just said, when they started getting his grunge, he said, look, he says, I really want to do this my way.
Yeah.
And if you don't let me do it my way, I quit.
So what would have happened? That's actually one of the questions I wrote for the show today was, what would have happened if he had quit? Could you conjecture what that might have looked like?
Well, we probably would have, similar to what happened this time.
Yeah.
Right, that he quit. We probably would have had to find another guitar player, and it would have been a big adjustment.
Would do you think Stevie would have stayed with the band if Lindsay left?
Oh, yeah.
And so let's talk about the other members. I don't want to make this the Lindsay Buckingham hour, but what would, if you had to describe Stevie in a sentence, what was she like during the making, or as a person in general, and during the making of this record?
She was a very lighthearted, happy person. She was spiritual. She was kooky in some ways, but she thought she was some witch. You know, she was very deep.
Yeah.
I found out that Beautiful Child was about her having an affair with an older man. And like there's one line in there that I always wondered what it meant. She says, you say it'll be harder in the morning, but whatever it is. And I was going, does she mean what I think she means? Then I said, nah. But she was a special girl.
What about Christine? Who I love the fact that you always refer to her as having a Dame Edna laugh. Right? You can hear it as you're reading the pages. But what was Christine's personality?
She was like a sailor.
Yeah.
She could out-drink you, out-smoke you, and out-swear you. But she was really just down to earth and
very stable.
Very stable. She could say things that could really hurt your feelings. I remember one time I kind of had a nervous twitch, and when I might walk into the studio, I might go, and she'd go, "Damn it, Caillat, I hate it when people mindlessly whistle." And I didn't even realize I was doing it. Like, oh yeah. And now I have seen it out with other people doing it too, and like, I know. So I could say something to them. Yeah. But she could see right through.
Wow.
So.
And she got along with all the other band members, right?
Yeah, she was great. She was the middle ground. She got along with Lindsay well. And,
even when he was going through this manic stuff, was she okay with him? And did she?
Well, no. I mean, she started dating Dennis Wilson.
Right.
And
one
so
of the
she was
Beach
in
Boys,
love.
Yeah.
Right. So she was in love, and so whenever Lindsay would be crazy, she took that as an opportunity to go be with Dennis.
Okay. So. And how about John McVie? How would you describe him?
Let me tell you one story about Christine. I remember the owner of the Village was a guy named Geordie Hormel.
Right.
He was a keyboard player, and He married Leslie Caron in the '60s.
I didn't know that.
And he was heir to Hormel Hams.
Right.
So he was a trust fund baby, and he had all this money. He had a mansion on Sunset Boulevard, down by Will Rogers Park.
Okay.
And he let his hair grow, and he wore funky clothes, and we came over to his mansion one day when we were trying to design Studio D, and she says, "Jordy, what the fuck are you doing? Look at you. You look like a slob."
Oh, my God.
And Jordy's helping us build the studio, and we're going, "Chris, what are you doing?" She goes, no, for fuck's sake, start dressing nicely, and, with an accent, a cigarette in her hand. And that's just how she did it. She just said,
wow,
"I'm going to tell you how I feel."
So she and John had been divorced already for a few years by the
Right.
time you were making this
Right.
record. Were they, deep down inside, were they still friends in any way, shape, or form?
I think they were, that they certainly tolerated each other.
Yeah.
But I think John was always wishing he could get back. He was always saying something like, "Come on back," or "I'm going to come over tonight." And
But meanwhile, he was a little bit famous for dating some attractive younger ladies at the time, wasn't he?
Right.
So,
yeah, John had his girlfriend with him,
yeah,
and Christine became best friends with her girlfriend.
that's uncomfortable. How about, let's see, who haven't I talked about? Oh, Mick. I perceive him from everything in both books that he's the dad.
He was the dad.
And the guys manage. Fleetwood Mac, the senior members of the band, actually had a management company called Penguin, right?
Right, Penguin.
So they managed their own career. So how did the dad in him deal with Lindsay being this petulant little a-hole?
Well, Mick was scared to death that he would lose. He would lose Lindsay, because Mick only makes money if he's playing in a band.
Yeah.
And if they broke up, he would.
Because he didn't write anything.
He didn't write anything, exactly. But he didn't know where to go. But Mick's dad was a colonel in the Air Force, very proper.
Wow.
So Mick is always very proper, and stands tall, but you could throw a touch of booze in there and cocaine, and then it's a little proper drunk,
Didn't he ever pull Lindsay out, into the airlock between the studio and the control room and go, "Snap out of it, dude. What the hell is your problem?" Or he was afraid that would piss him off.
Well, he did tell him in a graceful way. I found out later, after the album, that he said, "The name Fleetwood Mac and the image can only take so much. You can push it so far, and then the fans are going to bail out." And so I think he just said, speaking for the band, speaking for the kind of sound we want, don't push it.
That was very astute of him,
Right,
on a business level, to recognize the band's brand, because it had already been through probably 3 changes. They'd already made 10 or 11 albums by that point.
Sure.
And Peter Green and all that history.
And they were very adaptable.
Yeah.
To whatever the lead guitar player and the lead singer were doing.
And the songs.
Yeah.
But I guess the constant was Christine's songs, which, and if you listen, historically, her songs all sound like they come out of Christine McVie.
Right.
She doesn't, she changes with the times, but never got too nutty. And actually, I would love to interview her sometime. Let's see. I've actually written some questions. I think I have committed many of them to memory. I want to go back to the studio that you guys had built, because from an engineer-producer's perspective, that's the ultimate, is having spend as much money as you want, every piece of gear and every room design thing you could possibly think of, you can have. How did that feel?
Well, that was tremendous.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
I made a ceiling that was movable, and it was shaped in a curve.
Yeah.
And so we could open up the louvers, or close
So
them.
it's either reflective or absorptive.
Right. And I had a switch down here so I could adjust it. It was great. We chose the console. We chose the...
you had a Neve 8088?
8068.
8068, okay.
And that was kind of a debate for us, because Rumours was done mostly on an API, which is very aggressive and not open sounding.
Yeah.
Where the Neve is, for instance, the API is built on American standards. So like the EQs were 200 cycles, 400 cycles, 800 cycles, all multiples of the decimal system.
Right.
Where the English consoles were musical, built on A2, so 220, 440, 880 cycles. So those were your EQ points. So you weren't, if you were boosting 880, you were boosting whatever note that is.
Right.
You weren't boosting
an A, second octave A, yeah.
Right. So we were debating whether we thought that would give us more of a rounder sound, a fuller sound, and we could get a compromise.
Had you ever used the Neve prior to the one in D?
We had in different studios. Sound City had it.
Oh, that's right. So did you like the result that you got when the room was done and you first started cutting tracks for Tusk? Were you like, wow, this actually works? It's everything that we'd hoped for?
Yeah. It was nice and round, but I knew still how to make it aggressive. But remember, we were going with a darker sound for that record.
Yeah.
So.
But not initially, right? Initially, you didn't have a plan to necessarily go dark, or
no.
It was just Lindsay's input. Let's not make the sequel to Rumours.
Right.
So, let's talk a little more engineering stuff. Drumkit. What's your favorite kick drum mic, or do you remember what you actually used on that record for the?
I think I used a Sennheiser 441, or a 57.
Really?
I think there maybe a 421 sometimes. Depends on how his kick was tuned.
You are the single biggest fan of the Sennheiser 441. We've talked about this, I think, not in front of people before, but I could never make that. I used it because of you. I would literally read about you using it in REP or wherever. I tried so hard to make that microphone work, but I found it to be, it's kind of like the NS10 of microphones. It was kind of flat and boring to me. It worked. I mean, it was a fine microphone, but when you used it, it sounded like honey dripping from the speakers. Were you?
I don't think I wanted it to be honey dripping.
But it did. I mean, we used it on Rumours, right?
Right. Well, the magic was when I did Stevie's first vocal.
Yeah.
I lined up a bunch of mics, maybe 10 mics.
Wow.
And that on a regular console where all of my inputs were open, and I just had her go down and sing in front of each mic. I say that because now you normally have one input and you got to switch it, and you have to.
Right.
You can't just go through and hi.
Right.
So engineers don't know how to do that anymore. But anyway, so Stevie went down, and when she hit the Sennheiser, she this is it. I sound amazing.
And did you recognize it at that moment as well?
Oh yeah. Plus, when she said it sounded amazing, I had won the battle.
Right. She's happy. I'm happy.
So yeah, she's happy, and she's going to sing more confidently. So it's like, why would I argue?
Wow.
And she did. She sung out, and she loved the sound. So, and it made her voice. The Sennheiser is a dynamic, so the closer you get to the capsule, the more bottom you build up.
And it's funny. I mean, most people never think that something that works well on a kick drum could work on a female voice. I mean, they seem like polar opposites. What did you use on the snare?
Oh, AKG 451.
And did you do top and bottom, or just top?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. And if you...
I never found... I was always worried about this thing being out of phase,
Yeah.
Putting something on the bottom of it.
Yeah, I was never a fan of the bottom mic, but I know a lot of guys back in our day did do that. And of course, they'd hit the phase button to solve the problem. But
yeah, but they never can correct it exactly.
Right. Yeah, it can mitigate it, but it can't correct it.
Right.
So
we would loosen the snares and loosen the bottom head, and just use that 451 and crank the shit out of it and open it up. And
your snares always sounded great. And it's funny because I will say that on Rumours, the snares were great sounding and polite. They were really slick and like a cultured pearl of a snare drum. And on Tusk, they were definitely edgier.
Right.
So there's no question that you were at some point, either willingly or unwillingly, at least on board with Lindsay's vision of darker and edgier.
Right. Well, we learned a lot. We learned about tuning. On Rumours, we tuned the drums every day. So because otherwise Mick was tuning it, and sometimes if he was hungover, we'd get a different sound than the other days, and so we started taking over the tuning.
Did you tune them musically, like to a 1-4-5 or something, or did you tune them to the root?
So they
chord?
sounded pleasing amongst themselves.
Okay, but not necessarily to the song, or you didn't tune it to the bass. Okay.
Basically, tuning the top head to make it have an even tone, and then tuning the bottom head to be complementary. Richard Dashett, I give most of it. Well, I give him all the credit for that.
Okay.
He went out and tuned it.
That was his thing.
Yeah. And he would make them sound great. But later on the Tusk, we started doing these tricks, like you saw that.
Oh, right.
Like we would put a as you called it, a tampon on there.
No, a feminine napkin.
Yeah, right.
Right.
We would use a paper towel and put a piece of tape on it. So the paper towel, when you hit it, it would pop up and then it would go, and it would mute it down.
Yep. I thought that was brilliant. For those of you who weren't at the Road Rally, didn't hear me talk about this, I came out to LA, I think from Miami at the time, and I needed a control room to edit something or resequence a record, and they let me use Studio D at Village because these guys weren't there that day or that week or that month. You were on a break or working at Lindsay's house, whatever. And I went in there. Of course, the first thing I did was put down my briefcase and go out and look at where all the mics were and everything. It was like heaven for me. Because I admired your work so much, and I'm looking at all this stuff, and I remember, Ken doesn't remember it being a feminine napkin. I'm absolutely certain it was.
It wasn't. We just wadded up some paper towels, and taped it, and taped them in such a way that they didn't come apart.
I remember seeing the double sticky tape like a panty liner would have. Not that I've ever actually used one myself, just saying. But in any case, whatever it was, and I remember there was. It was like hinged with some duct tape to the edge of the snare. Maybe this was Hernan's dirty work, Hernan was
second engineer.
Yeah, bestowed to you guys from the Village as the second engineer, but became your buddy, your confidant, and made real contributions, I think, right?
Absolutely.
So, and he, by the way, he co-authored this fine book. Hernan, if you're watching, we love you. Can't wait to meet you in person. I feel like I know you. Anyway, I remember looking at that snare drum and going, oh my God. It was set up so that when you hit the snare, that the feminine napkin, the paper towel, whatever it was, I think it had a quarter or a nickel on it to give it a little weight. So you hit the drum and it would go boop, boop. It was almost like a valve. Mm-hmm. Like it let it ring just for a split second and then shut it down, rather than what everybody else was doing at the time was fully taping whatever damping material they had to, maybe 2 of them or 3 of them on a drum, if it was like, especially if like a floor tom. What did you use on the toms, on the 2 rack toms for mics?
Probably 421s.
Interesting. The record...
We would try different things in 87 sometimes.
Yeah, they always sounded like condenser mics to me and not dynamics, just great sounding toms. And what about the floor tom?
414?
Yeah.
No.
441?
Yeah.
Really?
Wait. No, the Neumann? Is that, I'm getting confused.
Oh, no.
That's a little pencil 40.
Oh, Neumann. Why can't I think of it?
I want to say 441, but that's...
No. Gosh, I can't think of it. I know what you mean. Yeah, it's like the size of your thumb and 4 inches long.
Right.
I can't think of it right now. I will. Let's talk about Christine's piano. Did you record with the lid up, the lid down?
Well, I would record with the lid down when they were tracking.
And did the band usually track as a unit, or did that happen less often?
We tracked as a unit almost all the time.
So, how was that?
But then we would replace most of the things.
Which I found fascinating when I read Making Rumours, that you guys replaced virtually everything on the record, yet you retained the life and the spirit that is so easily lost when you start replacing stuff. That you guys, that's to me the single greatest accomplishment of your production skills combined with their playing skills, is the fact that you maintained that joie de vivre, the spirit that comes through when a whole band plays in a room, but you replaced everything. You Frankensteined it and still kept it.
Yeah, but it's not replace it like we didn't do it that way. We would cut the track let's say Christine wanted to play a keyboard,
Yeah.
so we would cut it with a Rhodes, something she could play live in the room without
Right.
worrying about leakage, and then we would replace it. We would add to it with a grand piano,
Okay.
so it would be a new grand piano part that she would play, and it would be isolated.
How
Or
about?
Lindsay would play an acoustic guitar, or he would play an electric guitar.
And did you have problems with his electric bleeding into the drums, for instance?
Nah, never, because we had these ISO booths.
Oh, that's right.
So we would put the amp in an ISO booth, and then put a Leslie in an ISO booth, and use it to generate effects, and then he would basically be playing direct into the board. So if you went out to the room, all you heard was mixed drums.
Did Mick have a light touch or a heavy touch?
Well, he's got a really powerful touch on his drums, except the kick drum. We always called him Featherfoot,
That's right. I remember that.
because his first kick drum hit would be hard,
Yeah.
and then it would just, as he started playing, it would just diminish. And he used to sing when he was playing the drums. He would go ah 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 ah, and we would have to gate the singing,
Yeah.
the drum mic, to cut that out.
What about the bass? Your bass sounds on virtually every song are just amazing. And I know you and I have privately discussed your direct box before, but I don't think we did it at the Road Rally. I would love to turn these guys on to it. Tell them about your direct box.
Well, we had this direct box that a friend of mine, Larry Camara, at Wally Hyder's had built. It's called the Fat Box, and it was he discovered some sort of a FET, F-E-T,
Yeah.
transistor.
Right. Field effect transistor.
Right, and he put that in. He sunk it in epoxy, so you couldn't ever see it,
Wow.
or it would break it. But we use these fat boxes all the time.
And did you use it on stuff like if you took Lindsay's guitar direct, you used it on that, or if you took Christine's Rhodes, you used it on that?
It just sounded more open than everything else did. So we would use the fat box with John, and rarely use the amp.
I remember the first time you and I hung out, and I mentioned the Fat Box, and I said, yeah, I actually Googled it and found some for sale. They were like $600. And you went, where? I got to get one.
Yeah, I still haven't got it.
Really? All right, I'll find one and send you a link to it. Man, was it John's fingers, John's basses, or the Fat Box? Your bass sounds were just impeccable.
It's just EQ, I mean, I think it's down to knowing where the EQ needs to be on the bass. I remember hearing this. The Beatles always you could always hear the Beatles bass.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, well, how can you do that? Because when I would try to add a lot of 50, 60 cycles, what I call bass,
Yeah.
it wasn't there. But they could put the bass on on left or right speaker, but they use bass at 200 cycles, 200 or 400. They would just push that that's the apparent bass, and
Right.
gives you enough of the idea. So I would do some sort of combination of EQing at 200, 400, and maybe at 50 a little bit.
Did you find it was easier to make the bass sound good when you're using the Neve console versus the API, or didn't make that much difference?
Didn't make much difference.
The Neve transformers are pretty legendary, especially the 8068 transformers were pretty legendary for just making an engineer, making their job easy, I guess.
Yeah, I just think the low end is hard to deal with when it gets into a record. So
Did you ever mic his amp and take it direct, or it was always
I
direct?
always did that.
Okay, and did you end up using any of the amp signal in the mix?
Usually I would put the amp on track 1, because that's the edge track, and that's where you don't really want to put
Right, you
much
lose
out there.
top end there.
And 88% of the time, when we needed to cannibalize tracks for more tracks, we would just go over the bass.
Right. Wow, this is so interesting. Let's talk about automation for a minute, because the kids today don't know anything about the automation from back in our day. Nowadays, everything is automated, and I'm assuming you guys had Studer tape machines, right, on
Right.
Tusk and Studio D. Were you locking up tape machines at that point? It was only on Rumours that you did it, right? At some point.
No, we didn't do it at all on Rumours.
Oh,
we did on Tusk only for the ability to transfer important tracks over
to maintain the fidelity of stuff, right?
Well, so basically because the band started, as they started getting more inebriated, and they would like to party. Later on, they would like to try stuff and party, and so we realized that I wasn't going to stay there, and Richard wasn't going to stay there, so we let the second engineers stay there. We put up the another reel of tape, and they could, and which had the drums, bass, and the main stuff on it, and all the people could do their idiocy on the spare tape. So that's the only reason we would lock it up.
When
nothing got erased.
When your automation, did you use automation when you mixed Tusk at all?
Sure.
And so it was Neve automation. Flying faders invented yet?
They were.
Okay.
But we decided that automation it'll rule you.
Right.
You have to rule it.
It's for wussies.
Yeah. So, like the first thing, if you're mixing something, I was always a big believer in having 3 or 4 faders moving at the same time.
Yeah.
Because if the drums come up, then the guitar maybe has to come up at the same time, and so like in real life, if they were playing and the drums started playing louder, the keyboard player might start playing louder to be heard.
Right.
So all that dynamics. And what I didn't like about automation, if you tried to do a single fader at a time, it was impossible. It's like looking at a Monet through a pinhole. You don't get the big picture.
And the automation data was recorded, at least on the MCI consoles I worked on at the time, was recorded on track 24, on track of the tape.
Well, that was the tone.
Yeah.
The computer was guided. It was recorded on a big old. We used to have a floppy disk.
So you actually had floppies on that. Okay.
Right.
Wow.
But we learned to actually do the automation, and then but it was all hands on deck. So I would give Richard might do the drums,
mm-hmm.
and then John McBee, I would give him a piano. I would never give him his bass.
Right.
And so Lindsay would get something else, and so everybody would have to. We had 24 faders, and so we all would mark the faders with a China marker, so
right.
we knew the start point, and then we all had moves. We had mutes to all do. And what we would do is we would continue doing that, mixing with everybody making mistakes. And okay, that was stupid. You forgot to put echo on the snare on the third snare hit. And so and then once we got it, that's when then we would always run automation, but
right.
that's when we would say it. So when we got the mix, then we could refine certain things.
So you weren't building track by track like people frequently do with automation.
We didn't want to be a slave to it.
And let's talk about your mixing style, because I find it very relatable, and frankly, I don't think there's enough of that style out there now. You play the console like an instrument.
Right.
Describe that to the viewers.
Well, I mean, I guess it's you got to build a foundation. So usually when I start a mix, I pull down all the faders, and I look for what I call the heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
What's the soul of the song? And that's what you should surround it around. If it's a vocal and a keyboard, or vocal and acoustic guitar, or something, you put those two things, and that's where the song comes in. And then you say, how much percussion do I need? And you put in the percussion. So it's just about, everything has a place.
So it's interesting. A lot of people back then would start with like the bass, kick, and snare, and then build everything around it. So you went for the soul, the heart of the song, be it
right.
an acoustic guitar and vocal, and brought everything else up.
Right. I mean, sometimes you hear the acoustic
nice.
guitar and the vocal, and it's nice, and you put the bass in. Oh, that's really nice with the bass like that. And you could say, well, we could almost leave it like this, but okay, let's put a little bit of percussion in, and you start building the rest of the stuff around it, and you got to keep the heartbeat going.
How much input did the band have on mixes? They can, and I'm not talking about this band in particular, but I'm going to say generally that I always found that having the band in the control room during the setup of the mix, finding the initial balance, was always a train wreck for me, because you're listening to so many masters in the room. You're trying to please everybody that you please nobody. And this band in particular, having Lindsay, who was manic, and John and Mick, who were more than seasoned professionals. I mean, maybe the tightest kicked drummer and bass player working in the industry at the time. Did they influence your mix, or did they leave you alone and let you do your thing?
Well, I told them, I said, get out.
And they did.
I said, you got to leave me alone until I call you in here.
Okay.
I said, you want to sit there and, while I work on the bass for 10 minutes? No. Right? They didn't want to do that either.
Yeah.
So just go away and let me find my spot. And they knew that worked. Right? So I would come out when I'm ready. Okay, I'm really got this point. I think it's really cool. Come listen. And then they would all go, that's horrible, or whatever they would say. But usually,
would you be deferential to the person who wrote the song? If it was a Stevie written song, would you lean more on her, give her feedback more credence than other people in the band to try and please her because it was her song, or did you stick with just audio?
Yeah, you would do something. I mean, I wasn't going to get fired, but
Good boy, Ken.
If I felt that she was wrong, I might say, I don't know, Stevie, but she would usually. They got to know me well enough. I said, I really like your voice like this, and
they trusted.
She goes, well. I said, sometimes I might even say, just take it home. Here's a cassette. Take it home and listen to it. Let me know tomorrow.
This leads me to the discussion of what the producer's role was back in the 70s versus what the producers are today, which, producer today could be the guy that comes up with the hi-hat beat is now a producer, or who knows? I mean, it's sliced and diced. But describe the producer's role generally, not in terms of Fleetwood Mac or this record, but in general, what was the producer's job back then?
Well, I mean, my job was, and I always really respect if a musician can, if you're a well-rounded musician, you can play all the instruments.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way. That's the best producer. I can pick up a guitar and say, no, I'm talking about this kind of a guitar part. So, but I couldn't do that. So what I had to do is trust my ears and trust what feels good. And I would be that kind of guy, and they would, hopefully what I heard, they liked. And normally they did. So I would just be kind of a logical guy. Why don't we work? And I used to tell them, you won't come in, I don't care what you say, you won't come in tomorrow till at least 12 hours after you leave. So if we stay up till 3 in the morning, you're not coming into 3. That means the next day we're going to be going till 3 in the morning, and you're not going to be coming in till at least 3. So we're going to be on a midnight schedule. Nobody really wanted that. So I could kind of deal with logic.
And you also had to keep this record that was going off the rails on the rails. So you become kind of a manager, a de facto manager within the walls of the studio. You become a psychologist to them. How hard was it for you to keep this record, Tusk in particular, on the rails? Because it sounds like any day it could have just gone to hell in a handbasket.
It was hard. I mean, Lindsay was definitely difficult, and he was cranky, and the trouble is he didn't know he was cranky. He didn't know how to deal with things, and that's why I said I wish we had just all put our arms around him and said, let's, come on, let go, and let's find it. But I, it was my sound, so I was the kind of the sonic designer and making all the sounds, and so I was protective of those sounds, which is why I said maybe Lindsay had some truth in what he was saying, that
right.
I was fighting him when he wanted to. Maybe if I said, yeah, let's distort the speakers and everything, and but I'm sure my hearing is not as good today
because of that.
Right. He used to say, he'd always he'd go over to if he found the volume knob all the way up, he'd just turn it up, Caillat. Like, you're not a man if you're not listening to it full blast.
When you would work with Stevie or Christine on songs that they wrote, and you were out of his manic mode, were you more in charge sonically for their stuff, and did you tend to favor working on their stuff because it was less manic? Or no, it was all...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I just like making really good sounding stuff. And I would have liked to have done more with Lindsay, but he always liked, he could never figure out I could put delays on things, and I'd use my stopwatch, and he'd go, how do you do that?
He couldn't figure out the math?
No, and back they started doing the BPMs and BPM charts, and
yeah.
But I just like to basically count it and say okay. But anyway, he let me do a lot.
Richard was more of a psychologist, from what I gather, having read both of the books now. Could you have made both or either of these records without his ability to be, I don't know, sometimes like it seems like what?
Break the tension?
Yeah, like you were the team captain, you kept stuff on the rails.
Yeah, but I had a horrible sense of humor. He was laughing all the time. He could fall on the floor laughing over something he said. But and so he was, and he had great ears.
Yeah.
So he complimented me well, and I would get the sound, and I would say, "What do you think?" And he'd go, and he'd reach over and click something, or sometimes I'd walk away and let him set up the drums, and then he would let me come in.
That's nice that you guys had that trust in each other,
Yeah.
because that's really what it comes down to. Is
sometimes he'd get me in trouble, and then we'd go way over here, and then bring it back, and
yeah.
But I couldn't have done it without him.
Tell me about Hernan's role. This being Hernan Rojas, the co-author of said book, Get Tusked. He's now back. He grew up in Chile, right?
He grew up in Chile
and ended up in L.A. working at the Village Recorder, which anybody would give a fingertip to have that job. How does a kid from Chile get a job at Village?
He just had read. He went to school. He took a tramp steamer over, and
wow.
He just really wanted to do it. So, but he was a good guy. We used to make fun of him because he couldn't really speak English that well, but but he fit right in.
How that would be hard to fit in any band because it's a family in and of itself, but to not speak English that well and still become a member of this dysfunctional family.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Good for him. And then I found out later he started dating Stevie secretly.
Right. Yeah, let's talk about that. I think I might have asked you on stage, were you the only guy in the band that never had a romantic relationship with her?
I don't know if I'm the only one, but I didn't have a romantic.
You met your wife Diane during the making of this record, did you not?
I did.
I remember you had a girlfriend named Cheryl that was your girlfriend during the making of Rumours, and
Right.
Tell us the story about how you met Diane.
She was the receptionist
At the Village.
At the Village, yeah.
Wow.
So every day we'd come in, and then I started noticing Richard was hitting on her.
Yeah.
Like he and I used to do when we were doing mixing Rumours. There was a girl, Carol, that we'd sit out and sneak outside and talk to her when we could. Anyway, but Lindsay picked
Ended
her
up with her, right?
Right. But anyway, so yeah, Diane was at the receptionist desk, and they would send her in. She would do fresh vegetables for us, and vegetable plates, and bring it in, and so I started.
You liked her vegetables. Did you know when you first met her that she was the one?
Oh yeah. I
How long have you
told
guys
her
been married
boyfriend.
now?
I said, "What?
How long have you guys been married?
40 years."
Wow.
I told her boyfriend. I said, I'm in love with her. Just made one mistake. I'm all over that.
How did he react?
It's kind of like, what?
Did he also work at the studio?
He was a musician.
Okay.
So
boy, she really has a type, I mean, and ironic. I mean, obviously, in case you guys don't know, Ken is the proud dad of Colby. Colby Caillat, same last name. And so Diane's lived a life of music, being married to you and having a daughter who's a huge star in her own right. Pretty cool. What do you guys talk about at the dinner table, or what did you talk about when Colby still lived under your roof? Was it studio stuff?
No.
Really?
No, we tried to talk about normal things,
What's normal?
Colby was a little bit overweight, and she was wanting to be, going out and wear these sexy outfits, and it's like, no, Colbs. But she loved singing all the time. She started playing xylophone, and I got her a keyboard, made her, she hated lessons.
Yeah.
I told her Brad Pitt was going to be teaching.
Oh, really? And she liked that, huh?
Well, she took one lesson.
Yeah.
And then when she found out it wasn't Brad Pitt, I tried the same trick on golf.
Oh, really?
I said, "There's Brad Pitt's at the golf course."
Do you still golf?
Yeah, a little bit.
Because I suck, but I really love doing it. So we should go out and play a round of golf.
Yeah.
You know what I missed? Malibu Country Club. Did you ever play that course?
I did.
I love that place. I don't think they ever brought it back, right? It's laying fallow now for years. They closed it down like 5, 6, 7 years ago. Turned off the sprinklers, sent everybody home.
I like the Westlake golf course right here.
The one right off of...
yeah.
Really?
It's so easy.
It is. You play with 3 clubs, basically.
Well, you could play, but I mean, they got water hazards and things.
Yeah.
And I figure it's like anything else. I figure once I hit scratch.
Yeah.
I mean, it always kicks my ass. So I shouldn't be playing anything harder than that until I can, shoot 72 on it.
I once hit a car at the gas station. I forget which. I think it's at the turn, maybe. But yeah, I hit a car, and I think I ended up giving that guy I think I had like $300 cash on me. I said, "Here, this has got to cover getting the dent." But broadsided the car in the gas station. I don't know how I did that. Anyway, I like that course. I've played it, I don't know, a couple dozen times probably.
Yeah, but let's play.
Yeah, we should once we can actually go out in the world again. Let's see, how are we doing on time? Wow, only 15 or like 17 minutes left. Let me see if there's anything that I haven't covered.
So what happens if we finish early? We just sit here and...
Yeah, we just hang out. No, we would take some questions from the guys in the chat. We can do that.
Is anybody doing anything?
I don't know. Are you guys awake in there?
It says you guys suck.
That's not possible. Oh, book giveaway. They're reminding me. Yeah, what we're doing, though, is the person that puts the best question, and I will pester Ken to get him to answer the question, person who puts the best question in the comment area below the video over the next week. So you've got until next Monday, which will be the 23rd, and I will get him to... I didn't know if he had any of these laying around, so I ordered one from Amazon. It didn't come in today. I was going to bring mine with me to have you autograph it to give away. So autograph this one, and I'll reimburse your book.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, that's what we'll do, is whoever asks the best question, and then I will pester Ken and get him late at night to go into the comment section and type out a little answer for whatever that award-winning question is.
Tell us what the Little Neumann is.
KM84.
Yep.
I always liked that mic.
I use it always for hi-hat.
I used it on hi-hats. I used it on overheads on occasion. Loved it like on a Fender Twin on some guitar sounds. Found that it was a really versatile mic. Mm-hmm. Had a sound, but not too much of a sound.
Right. I used to like using a condenser and a dynamic on an amp. And you could put them out of phase and then slide them back and forth until you get you get the tone you want.
It sounds like you used more room mics on Tusk than you did on Rumours. Was that by intent, or you happen to have? I mean, there's just stuff that sounds. For all I know, it could be delays. I don't know. There's just more stuff where you go, oh, that's interesting. I can hear a wall over there. How did that come about?
I think we did. I think we just because we built the room and the room sounded so good.
Yeah.
That we just liked it for a lot, but we used a lot of delays. I try not to use. I try to add. Like on a vocal, I try to capture the vocal without much room on it, so I can put whatever I want on it.
What's your favorite reverb? I mean, as far as like, what's your go-to reverb device?
Oh, Reverb 1.
Okay.
Is that Wave? I don't know who it is.
Oh, nowadays. I'm talking about back then when you made this record, back in the 70s.
Oh,
were you a plate guy?
EMT plate.
Okay.
We built in the village. We built a replica of the Capitol chambers.
Oh, that's right. We talked about this at the rally, but we should talk about it again because it's fascinating. Not that many people know what a live echo chamber is. Basically a reverberant room with really smooth, reflective walls, speaker on one end, microphone on the other. So you guys replicated the dimensions of the Capitol. I'm surprised they gave you the dimensions because that was
I was always using them. So we often hired the Capitol Records to use their chamber, their number 2 chamber or whatever.
Right.
And we back then you could rent Class A phone lines.
Wow.
Which was
so you could patch in from across town.
Right.
Yeah, because Village had to be 5 to 10 miles away from Capitol.
I thought that was amazing that you could just Class A phone lines.
Wow.
I don't know if you could still do that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think you can.
But then we built a replica of it.
Yeah.
In the room, and so we could.
Where was the replica? Underground again?
No, it was in the room. Wow. We had this huge wall, a door like this.
Yeah.
The whole length of the chamber, and we could open it up and seal it. But we found that we could also open it up a little bit and play an acoustic guitar into it.
Oh, wow.
And get real echo, not from through a speaker.
Not recirculated. So, so you'd have Lindsay literally sit like 4 feet outside that door,
right? And
then just put the microphone where it would normally be on the guitar, but it would pick up the reverb from.
Right.
Wow, that's kind of a luxury.
And then when I went back to the Village after 20 years or something, I went in there and they had all their mic stands and their music stands in the room. I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "This is the Capitol Chamber replica."
Oh, man.
It is?
So, I want to talk about your project with the record plant Sausalito, which I mean, I literally get a lump in my throat knowing that you're doing this. And before I got here, or before you got here today, Nittany was telling me that you've closed the deal now, and you guys actually. So, tell everybody what you're doing with that place, which I just think is amazing.
So the place where we built the foundation for Rumours, Sausalito Record Plant, is where after I recorded the radio mix of Rhiannon, I went up to Sausalito with my dog and lived with the band for 4 months, and then we worked at the Sausalito Record Plant, and it was terrific. So, and it really has a vibe, and we recorded every track there except Jane.
Okay.
But later on, a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I started noticing that my favorite places were starting to be bulldozed, like Texas Opry House was gone, disappeared.
Wow.
And it became a computer center, and they paved the parking lot, and I went down to see Wally Heider's, and Wally Heider's Studio 4, the main room, and Studio 1 were now gone. And so I said, well, when did this happen? And I wish I could have done something about it.
Yeah.
So suddenly I accidentally stumbled across Sausalito Record Plant one day, and it was bankrupt, and it was locked up, and bank owned it, and so I started thinking about it, like maybe it's time I need to start giving back, or maybe I need to try to save this old girl. So since 2012, I've been trying to save her. And we just last week just closed the deal.
Congratulations.
We have 13 investors, and so now we're going to renovate it. We bought a ton of equipment from another recording studio that was going out of business.
Yeah, Nittany told me you got the stuff from Fantasy. I actually did an audio book in Fantasy once upon a time. Wow, I can't say congratulations in a big enough way. That is giving back, because those old studios, there's so much history that went on in that room. I mean, Rumours probably the biggest record that was ever done there, but a lot of
Songs in the Key of Life were done there. The first Prince album was done there. Huey Lewis. I mean, there was 44 great albums done there.
And so, are you guys going to turn into a museum or a working studio?
Well, it's going to be a little bit of a give back, a shout out to Northern California.
Yeah.
Because Apple was up there and Ampex was up there. Ampex, if it wasn't for Bing Crosby investing in Ampex, the multi-track may not have been invented.
Wow.
Would have been a lot later, and so Ampex was in Redwood City.
Yeah.
And then, so I just felt that there was such great stuff. So we want to make kind of a museum of the Haight-Ashbury district, the influence of hippie rock back in the late 60s, early 70s. We're going to get the 2 studios running. One of the studios I'm going to put back exactly like it was when we did Rumours.
That was B?
Yeah.
And how
I'm
long?
going to tell people, I said, by the way, we put it back exactly how it was. So I'm going to give them a challenge. If you're as good as me, you can make a record that sounds like Rumours. Or if you're as good as Stevie Wonder, same thing. And I'm going to try to offer some sort of cash prize. If you can get your record on the top 20, you'll get $25,000 or something.
How long do you think it'll take before you can open the doors?
Probably about a year. We've got to go through the wiring and see if the rats have what they've eaten, and the roof needs some work, and the air conditioning, the HVAC needs some work. So,
do you think the band will come up for the grand opening?
Sure.
Yeah. Do you still talk to Lindsay? Is enough time?
I don't. I haven't talked to Lindsay, and I presented him the Les Paul Award in 2015, maybe 2014.
So if you called him and told him about this, he might fly up for it?
Yeah.
Okay. Make me a promise as another old studio rat that when you're on one of your trips going up there to, just check on how the construction's going, give me a shout, let me fly up with you. I want to go see it.
Okay.
I'm so proud of you for doing it and grateful. As you know, right before we met at the Road Rally, I was able to fly back to my old homestead at Criteria, and none of the rooms are as they were, and it was a little heartbreaking. On one hand, I was just glad to see that they were still open and still making great records, but it was heartbreaking not being able to look at that classic stuff. And you're bringing, it's like like the Queen Mary, bringing the Queen Mary back to life.
Mm-hmm.
Some things just shouldn't go away. So
yeah, they had stained glass in the ceiling over the console.
Yeah,
it was beautiful stained glass, and they took it out, and I'm trying to get it back.
Where did it go?
It went to I'm going blank on the 2 owners. It went to one of the owners' wives.
Oh, okay.
And so he's got it, but she's asking like $25,000 for it.
Because she knows you want it.
Probably, but one of my partners says we'll just we have pictures. Let's make another one.
Replicate it.
But if we can, I'd rather get her.
Yeah.
Get it from her.
No, we can call Uncle Vito and send him over to have a talk with her about it. Anything that we didn't talk about? The one thing, we still have 5 minutes. And we have to talk about this. The recording of the song Tusk, when you guys, first of all, how did it come about that you decided to use the USC marching band, and tell everybody how the recording of that went?
Well, that was really completely winging it.
Yeah.
I mean, we barely got that record done. That was the song was a stage riff that the band used to warm up with when they were on stage, so they would get all the sound levels for the PAs.
Right.
And so Lindsay, he said, when we were kind of looking around for more stuff, when it was going to be a double record, we decided, well, we could find something. And Lindsay said, what about this one? Da 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 da, is kind of the riff.
Yeah.
And so we started building the record, and as I said, there was some infant. What am I trying? So the guys were
an infinite amount of
infant, but they were being infants.
Oh,
Tusk, Tusk, get it?
Right,
Get it?
Childlike.
Yeah. Whatever that word.
Moronically boyish.
Yeah. What are you talking? I said, well, grow up, you guys. What are you, kids?
It has a sexual innuendo for those of you from this generation that don't know.
And so then Lindsay started doing all these, making sounds, and then we decided it would be really interesting to make percussion, and we made percussion loops and Mick would do percussion loops, crazy loops, and then we would just play them backwards and play them in there, just making it. We built it up to be kind of a cacophony of sounds.
And it works incredibly well.
It did, yeah. And then Mick had this idea that I remember he came in one day and said, we could actually put horns in this thing, a marching band in there. And he said, and the bonus on that would be marching bands around the world could when we go play live, they could come in and so we get the city involvement.
Right.
So somebody called up USC, and we had a meeting with them, and they said, let's do it at Dodger Stadium. I'm thinking, this is great, I'm going to pitch from the Dodger Stadium pitcher mound. So anyway, so we went to Dodger Stadium and recorded the USC marching band. And
Did you throw a pitch from the mound?
Oh yeah.
Good for you.
It's harder than I thought.
Yeah, it does. I've never been on a pro ball field before, but yeah, anytime you stand on it, I can't believe how far it is. Mm-hmm. So how hard was it capturing the band? I mean, did you use a mic on one end of the field, a mic on the other? Didn't you have phase issues with them marching? How'd you solve all that stuff?
I mean, we got there, and somehow we brought a normal complement of microphones, but we got there, and I said, okay, where are you guys going to stand? Trombones, trumpets, and they're going, well, we don't stand. We're a marching band. I said, okay, yeah, but where are you going to be? He said, well, we're going to be marching from here to there. I said, well, can't you march in place? No. So it just completely astounded me that they couldn't do that. So we had to send out for shotgun mics is what we did. So and then another problem we realized is that we had like 75 orchestra members there.
Yeah.
So we didn't have 75 headphones, or enough amp power to power 75 headphones.
So what'd you do?
Run. So we decided to again, we're winging this we decided to give the conductor, I can't remember his name, the headphones, and so
makes perfect sense.
Everybody was playing charts, so we just gave it to him, and he would use his wand to keep everybody in line.
And it worked.
It worked, but we had a separate tape machine. We had two tape machines, one playing the track, and then one recording all the marching band on separate 24.
Wow. So
we actually had to fly it back in when we were mixing, and there's a part I can't tell you where it is that we realized we started it wrong, and I twisted the VSO, the speed of and you hear the orchestra go, I had to speed up and then down.
Just to keep it all on time.
Right. But it just sounded like, it was meant to be.
One of my wife's closest friends was actually in the USC marching band and played on that record.
Really?
Yeah, she loves talking about it. I mean, you guys got to change lives for a bunch of kids. I mean, biggest band in the country,
Not bad.
Wow, how exciting. Let's go 5 minutes longer. You okay staying 5 more minutes?
Sure.
And we'll take a couple questions from the audience.
I got some for you.
All right, Ariana's got some questions.
Okay, so Linda Cullum asked, what recording projects are you working on now?
Linda Cullum wants to know, hi Linda, what recording projects are you working on these days?
Well, we are doing artist development.
Right, Artist Max. By the way, right. I should mention, tell them what Artist Max is.
So we do artist development, which means young artists that come to us, and we record them, we teach them, we bring in choreographers, vocal coaches, writing coaches to work with them, develop the song. We have professional musicians come in and build up the track, and so Artist Max. That's what artist development is.
Yeah.
And we have a couple artists that we're working with now. We're working with a young girl from Russia.
Wow.
And we helped get her a green card so she can stay here. And she sounds like Adele. She's amazing.
Wow.
But anyway,
is she going to affect the outcome of the upcoming election? I'm kidding. Some news other than coronavirus.
Right.
Anyway, sorry.
So Artist Max started 4 years ago when I was even earlier than that, when I had to help my daughter get prepared for live stage, and we had to hire these people, and I saw how they affected her, and they were so good at her bringing her around, making her a professional. And we were spending sometimes $1,000 a day.
Wow.
Some of these people, and I realized that was an important part, but most people can't afford that. So with Artist Max, I would hold a 4-day event where people would come in and they would write for 2 days, and then we would choreograph, do motion, movement exercises and vocal exercises, and they and make them. And you'd see the amazing transformation that they would go through. It's like learning to be a golfer. They say you got to learn how to swing like a pro.
It's fascinating. People don't think about that side of the business because they think it's all about I wrote a hit song. But
it's not. It's not about your. It's sort of about your vocal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but some people think if I've got a great voice and a great song, I'm done. But you still have to be. You have to be an entertainer. You have to go out there, and you have to be healthy. It's like being an athlete. You have to eat right and sleep right, and you have to go out and get up every day and go out there and be happy and
it's training for a prize fight.
Yeah, people want to see you and they want to listen to you. You have to be likable, and it's a whole thing. You have to have just the right amount of package. So that's what Artist Max does, and that's one of the things we're going to be putting at the record plant. Artist Max, we're going to be looking for auditions for people who want to start that off, want to be our first guinea pig, so to speak.
You should do a TV show.
Yeah. Maybe we can do Taxi there.
There you go. I'll come up and do Taxi TV with my webcam.
Yeah.
I got to say, the webcam looks really good in this room today. We are, by the way, in Kent's studio, sequestered because we're both old enough that we were told to stay home by our governor today. But we are in Southern California in a secret location. Colby's records were made under this roof, right?
Yeah, the vocals were done, yeah.
Okay, and...
actually, most of them were done at the Village.
Oh, really?
Where we did Tusk.
Oh, you did them in D.
No, we didn't do them in D. We did them in A, where Steely Dan did theirs.
Oh, okay. Wow, one of my all-time favorite bands.
Yeah.
One more question.
On that note, Glenn Lest asks, how did you find producing your daughter's records, and were you able to establish the same discipline as you did with Fleetwood Mac?
It's a great question from Glenn Lentz. Hello, Glenn. Do you know Glenn actually, he's not a Taxi member, but he sent me a really nice thank you note the other day and a gift card for Starbucks, just saying, I watch your show all the time, and I just want to say thank you.
Hey, Glenn. Nice one.
Yeah, I thought that was really sweet of him. So he wants to know if working on Colby's records, if you had to bring the same sort of discipline to bear with her as you did with Fleetwood Mac.
Well, not the same kind of discipline, but, when I decided to do her record, I was really nervous about it because I hadn't done a record in a while. I did her first record with Michael Blue, who's one of the producers here.
Right.
But I thought he bailed out of the second record, and I thought, well, I'll do it.
Okay.
But then I thought, boy, I hope I'm not too old. I'm going to wreck her career. And it was great. I brought in top musicians, and it's just like riding a bike. It's about getting the song right. And she did her vocal coaching, and she did a little choreography, but she's such a good singer.
I actually saw her at what used to be the Kauai Songwriters Festival years ago. She came out and did one night, I think did 3 or 4 songs on stage, and she was pretty magical, I gotta say. You could feel her, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. She had great stage presence.
She's such a sweetheart.
She is. I talked to her afterwards. She's a very nice kid.
One of the things I think is great about her, and I tell a lot of artists, a lot of artists sing in too high of a key.
Yeah.
And then they're up here and their voice is stretched and there's not much room. And Colby gets down here, so her vocal cords are relaxed and she has a little bit more time to make the notes bend. And so
she's in a band now, right?
She's in a band, called Gone West.
That's right. I remember seeing that somewhere online the other day and meant to ask you about that.
But now they've canceled all their appearances.
Oh, because of the virus.
Right.
Well, this is a great opportunity for all of you who have wanted to spend more time working on your music. Take advantage of this because it's something nobody could have predicted, but now you've got nothing but time probably, especially if you have to stay home from work.
Yeah, write a hit song.
Yeah, write a lot of hit songs. I want to thank you for doing this. You know how much I enjoyed reading these books. I got to tell you, you should read them both, frankly. You could read either one without the other, but I probably read them about 3 weeks apart. This book I started, Ken gave me like a pre-production version of it because I wanted to have some material to use for the road rally. And I think I started on a Saturday morning around 7:30 a.m. and read probably 2/3 of it that day. I couldn't put it down, and then finished it off the next day. You feel like you're in the room. You can smell the studio. You can feel the tension. That's
what I wanted to do. I wanted to give people the feeling of what a big time record feels like, because it's very special.
It's so hard to explain that to somebody that hasn't been in the room. Maybe I found it so relatable because I have, but I don't think so. I think you just did a really good job of talking about the nuance. That nuance of, it's one thing to sit down and say, you know, I want to roll off 500 hertz on this electric guitar or whatever. That's tech talk, and that's great, and there's some of that in the book, but the personalities of this band, what a unique position you were in to work with a band that was brilliant and manic and productive all at the same time.
And making music. It's you know, it's like being in a baseball team, but more creative, and I don't know, there's nothing like it when you're in a really good studio and every instrument's perfect and everybody's creative and you're making this music that makes people feel good.
And it lives on.
Yeah.
A baseball play will only be recounted by rabid fans that can say, remember when he stole second. This is something that everybody loves music and everybody can listen to over and over. And this book, Making Rumours did a really good job of setting everything up. This takes you through the mental meltdown and the precipice of this record not happening, and somehow miraculously it did. Did you sleep for like 6 months after you finished this record?
I think so.
Well, thank you, Ken. I'd shake your hand, but not this week, buddy.
Yeah,
that's right. Thank you guys for watching the show.
Thank you,
hope you enjoyed this as much as I obviously did.
You always do a great job.
Thank you, Ken. You're my favorite subject, I gotta say. And we will see.
Play us out.
Yep, see you guys. Ironic after talking about a great record, and this is what I'm going to play. See you guys next week.
Can they see it? Yeah.
Oh, you know who's on next week? Robin Frederick.
Oh, great.
Yeah, Ken produced Robin Frederick. She actually lived in their guest house when Colby was a baby, right? Small world. All right, I will see you on a golf course when we can do that again. I will see you guys next week for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Yeah, baby. Woo-hoo. See you guys.